Hey everyone, it's Jen B, and welcome to my studio. In today's video, I'm going to be taking you through the process of creating a custom ring. Leslie at Black Dog Vintage reached out to me to see if I could make her a ring using this scarab in lucite that she purchased at a flea market. Now, I have to say I am not a fan of bugs. However, I love Leslie and decided to put my fears of bugs to the side and work on this for her. So let's get to work and see how this turned out. Alright, so first things first, I need to figure out exactly how high to make the bezel for this piece. This was a really odd-shaped, quote-unquote, stone to work with, and it didn't have a very specific girdle. The girdle is where, the stone or the cabochon would start to curve, and it was really uneven all the way around, and so I was doing my best trying to figure out exactly the height of the bezel I needed to create in order to keep the stone in place or to secure it in place. In the end, I decided to go for a twofold approach where I used a bezel and prongs to secure the stone in place. And this actually ended up working really well because the lucite piece had 4 holes in it, and I ended up using the prongs to disguise those holes in the end. So you can see me kind of measuring and figuring out the height of the bezel that I needed, and then cutting the bezel wire and getting it to the exact size that I need, and filing the ends so that they are 90 degrees and flush with each other. And then I head over to the soldering area and start to get the bezel soldered together. I just put the bezel on a little chip of solder, and then I'm spraying it with flux and getting it up to temperature. And I zoom in here so that you can really see the solder when it flows. It just kind of jumps up into that seam, and then I'm using my flame to make sure that it is pulled all the way through that seam. Now I'm just double checking that the bezel does fit the piece really well. And then I sand the back of the bezel so that it's completely flat and spend some time shaping the bezel around the little scarab piece so that it is a perfect fit. Now I'm sawing out the back plate and getting the bezel soldered down to the back plate. Adding the little pieces of solder on the inside of the bezel. Then getting everything up to temperature. It is already sprayed with the flux and prepared with the flux. So I'm just now heating and spinning and heating from the top and underneath so that everything can get up to temperature. This was a really large piece, so it took a little bit of time for everything to get up to the correct temperature. Once it flows, I threw it in the pickle, and then I'm going to work on getting the prongs attached. I had decided where I wanted to place the prongs, and then you see here that I've got one of the prongs set up in a third hand, placed right where I need it. I used 14 gauge half-round wire for the prongs. I'm working on getting that prong soldered down. I did have a little bit of trouble getting this one soldered, and I think that was mostly user error, because here in a moment I'm going to test and see if the prong was actually soldered to the back plate, and it wasn't. And I believe that is because I did not have the prong resting completely on the back plate. So I go back in and make sure that there is a very strong connection between the two, get the solder to flow, and then it was soldered down perfectly. I give you a quick look at what that prong looks like, and then I just repeat for the other 3 prongs. Now, I had decided for this design to put like an oval frame around the entire piece, but I didn't have an oval mandrel the size that I wanted, so I had my husband use his 3D printer to print me an oval mandrel to the specifications that I needed, and it worked really, really well, surprisingly. I don't think that it will hold up to long-term use and hammering, but it is definitely something that I'm going to keep in mind for the future if I need a mandrel to a certain shape and size. So I'm getting that oval soldered together. And then I'm taking it back over to the bench and using that 3D printed mandrel to shape it with a nylon mallet. And it looks just perfect, just how I wanted it. All right, and now I need to work on getting that oval soldered to the back plate. The oval wouldn't stay flat on the back plate in that one spot that you see I have it clamped down. So this is just a clamping tool that I used in order to make sure that that oval was touching the back plate, because if metal is not touching when you're trying to solder it together, the solder will not flow and it won't be soldered together. So just taking time to get it all up to temperature and using my pick to make sure that that oval is touching the back plate completely all the way around. And then I'm working on getting the ring band formed. I am going to be doing an adjustable ring band to cover 3 different sizes that Leslie and I discussed. And so I am using a wire called Crazy 8 here, and it is an 8-gauge half-round wire. I'm just forming the ends, or rather shaping the ends to be really nice and smooth. And then I use my ring bender, which I do not have a clip of, to form it into a circle so that the ends are overlapping and can be adjusted. Oh, but before I do that, I do file a flat spot on one end of the wire, and this is going to be where it attaches to the back plate. So just using my ring mandrel to really shape and make sure that that ring is a perfect circle. You can see the ends of the ring band are overlapping there. And I'll be soldering down one end, and the other end will remain free so that it can be adjusted. And then I move on to cutting out the back plate. Just a matter of going around and making sure that I am staying right next to the oval wire, but not cutting into it. Filing everything smooth, using a variety of different files. And then I move on to making sure that all of the scratches are removed from the back plate before I add the ring band. It's a lot easier to do all of the polishing and scratch removal before the ring band is soldered into place, because then it gets in the way of all that. So getting the back plate in tip-top condition without the ring band is how I prefer to do it. So here you see I've got this yellow powder in a little container. This is called yellow ochre, and I'm going to be mixing a little bit of the powder with some water to create a paste. I'm going to be putting that paste on the area that I do not want soldered to the back plate. If metal is dirty, solder cannot flow, and so you can use something like yellow ochre to make your metal dirty in order to prevent solder from flowing. Since I want one end of the ring band to remain free so that it can be adjustable, I am painting the yellow ochre on that arm of the ring band. Once I've got the yellow ochre in place, I'm showing you that I'm going to be using a paste flux for this particular soldering operation. Most of the time, I like to use liquid flux, but if I was to spray the ring band with liquid flux, it's going to make that yellow ochre bleed all over the place, and that really defeats the purpose of having the yellow ochre because I need it in that very specific spot so the solder won't flow on that part of the ring band. So I'm just applying the paste flux to the area that I'm going to be soldering down, preparing it with a little bit of heat, and then I will add a piece of solder to that area and pre-flow it so that I can then sweat solder it to the back plate that you see there in the pumice. I add just a little bit more paste flux to the outside of the ring band on the edge that is going to be soldered down. And then, like always, I am getting everything up to temperature so that the solder will flow. Okay, the ring band got soldered down perfectly, and then I spend some time doing a final polish and giving it some patina, throwing it in the tumbler, I think for about 8 hours in order to get the satin finish that I wanted for the piece. And then it's on to setting that little bug in the ring. So first off, I am securing the bezel. Again, the bezel wasn't going to be used to set the stone 100% in the ring. It was going to be a dual bezel and prong setting. So here I'm just cutting off the amount that I need for the prongs. I wanted them to be just high enough to cover the holes that were in the lucite, but not enough to detract from the overall appearance of the ring. So I'm measuring and trimming, and then filing and shaping the prongs so they have a nice appearance to them. From there, I work on setting the prongs into place, making sure that they are covering those holes as best they can. Again, I didn't want the prongs to be too long and to be distracting, so I am getting them right where I want them. I did need to adjust them some, and the holes themselves were not 100% symmetrical in the piece, so the prongs were as close as I could get them to perfection. Buffing the tops of the prongs so that they are smooth, and just double checking that they are nice and tight up against the lucite. And here is the finished ring. It is so cool. Again, I don't like bugs, but this ring came out really, really neat. I'm going to try to put a picture up in the corner that Leslie sent me of this ring glowing. I had totally forgot that the lucite glows. So overall, it was just a really fun project. I am really happy with the way it turned out and glad that Leslie loves it as well. Thanks so much for joining me for this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing how this ring came together, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.